So I'm looking to my window from Marissa, and she sent me a couple of questions here. One says, what tip or concept from the book was the most impactful for you? I think for me, the big change in my research and study was, and it really came true in the writing process, was the fact that the presence of the imposter can be a good thing. That voice in your head can be a sign of things happening that are very, very positive. And the reason I say that is when I look back at my career, I realize that many of the moments that were the most stressful, when I felt the most insecure, when I felt the least qualified, when I felt like I was in over my head, those were some of the most pivotal moments of my career when something good was really happening. There were learning opportunities there. I was surrounded by people that may intimidate me, but offered lots of opportunity to me. And so I began to realize that when I hear that voice, I don't need to run for the exit. I need to look around and say, what is it about this situation that is causing me to feel that way? And what is the great thing that is either happening or is about to happen that I can take advantage of? So that was a key mindset shift, a key thinking and recognition that helped me to not only overcome the fear associated with imposter syndrome, but actually leverage it for my benefit. Let's see, another question. How did you decide what tips or concepts would make it into the book? This is a great question, and there was a lot to look at and a lot to think about. And one of the things I really tried to do was make sure that the information that I provided in the book, the stories and the data, and by the way, I tried to really balance stories with data. I didn't want it to be completely anecdotal and just a bunch of stories, and yet stories are so powerful and relatable. So there's a lot of research and a lot of stories coupled together. But one of the things I tried to make sure that I didn't put in the book is personality specific ideas and tactics and techniques. And what I mean by that is there are some things that will work really well for an extrovert that just may not work for an introvert, or things that are going to come easy to one personality that aren't going to come easier or aren't going to be natural. They're going to be very forced to a different personality. And so I tried to make sure that I'm not just giving you the Kris Kelso way, be like me and you can do what I've done. I tried as best I could to weed that out and to focus on principles that are universal, that are widely applicable. I'm not going to claim that I succeeded 100% at that. You can figure that out as you read it and see how well the information resonates. But I really tried to consider that and not create a book that was just written for people like me. I want this to be open to anyone, any type of personality, any situation where you're struggling with that inner critic. What is the imposter syndrome thought or action that people struggle with the most? So I would say a very simple phrase that is so hard to speak, and it is the phrase, I don't know. When you are struggling with imposter syndrome, and particularly when you're in a situation where people are asking you questions and they're looking to you to be the expert, one of the hardest things to do is to admit that you don't know something. And yet, that phrase, I don't know, is immensely freeing. And let me tell you why. When you say, when someone asks you a question and they're looking to you to have the answer and you just don't have it, you just don't. Maybe you shouldn't have the answer. Maybe it's an unreasonable expectation, or maybe you should, but you just don't know. When you start talking and trying to talk your way into the answer, you've probably all been there. When you're talking through and you're trying to come up with an answer as you speak in real time, you just are digging a hole. You're digging a hole of representing yourself as knowing something you don't. And when you start with, I don't know, but then you can talk about your ideas, your thoughts, your theories without the pressure of proving yourself right. And so one of the practices I recommend in the book is when someone asks you a question, before you speak, think, do I really know the answer to this, or am I just going to guess? Am I just fronting? Am I just pretending? Am I just going to try to put on the air of expertise, or do I really have it? And here's the thing, if you say, I don't know, but here's some thoughts, or let's explore this, or we can figure this out, you're not going to lose people's respect most of the time. In fact, you're going to gain their respect, because usually when you don't know and you dance around it like that, people know you don't know. So just be honest. So that phrase, I don't know, it's so simple, but simple is not always easy, and it's hard to do. And I'll admit, I'm guilty of that, and I struggle with it, and I have to remind myself to say I don't know when I don't know something. A couple other questions coming in. Jack asks, why don't you live stream more? Oh, Jack. This is my buddy Jack Scalfani, and he's a YouTube sensation and knows this stuff. Honestly, Jack, I've just never done it before. This is my first time live streaming, and I probably should. You're right. I've been so focused on, serving clients and doing things that online video is something I've known for a while I need to do, and I just haven't done it. But I will. I'll be doing more. So that's my commitment to you, Jack. Thank you. Mark Schaefer asks, what were the top 3 hurdles? That's a good question. Well, first of all, imposter syndrome about being an author was a challenge that I had to get over. And my publisher, Dexterity, my writing coach, Matt, helped me a lot with that. And there was a process there. And even at one point, and I wrote about this in the book, in fact, I had to use some of my own techniques on myself because I got a particular piece of really bad feedback about this book and this process that just allowed that inner critic to jump up and try to hammer me. And so battling imposter syndrome, anytime you try something new, there's an opportunity for that imposter to sneak up and try to capitalize on that and convince you that you can't do it. Another hurdle was just the discipline of writing. I have written short pieces before. I have never written a 30,000 plus word book in my life. And I knew it was work. I respect people who write so much now. I mean, I always did, but now even more so. Building the discipline of writing and pushing through those moments when I just felt like I had writer's block and I just couldn't do anymore. That was definitely a hurdle. And the key to doing that, honestly, is having a great team around you. I did not do this alone. Dexterity and Matt and the people that I've mentioned really helped me to push through this, and it was so valuable. I couldn't have done it without. I don't know how people write a book and then go try to find the people to publish. I guess they just have a gift for that, because I couldn't write a whole book like this without accountability and encouragement and coaching and those kind of things. Let's see. Katie asks, what point did you realize the self-talk you mentioned is also common among others? The imposter phrases you gave are so familiar and resonate with my own. Yes. This was first of all, when I learned about imposter syndrome as a thing, when a coach, actually, an executive coach, mentioned it to me one time, and I went and read about it and studied it, just knowing that it was a thing that psychologists had identified and named, and that there had been studies on it, was so freeing, because I felt like, okay, this is not just me, right? There are other people, and this has been studied, and there's a reason behind this. So just knowing it was a thing helped a lot. And then I did wonder if it was something that, entrepreneurs, that kind of my tribe and the kind of people that I spend a lot of time with struggled, or if I was unique in there. And so I just started talking to people about it. I started asking questions and sharing my struggles. I share some stories in the book of some times that I got pretty vulnerable with people, and come to find out exactly what you just said. You said the phrases that I gave are so familiar and resonate with my own. And that's what I would hear. When I would be honest and say, this is what I struggle with, the imposter would tell me, if you're honest like that, if you're vulnerable, people are going to make fun of you, people are going to ridicule you, people are going to lose respect for you. And the opposite happened. People said, oh my goodness, thank you. I feel that way too. I've been hoping to find somebody that I can tell this to, because I've been holding it in and share. And so I learned that when I'm open, people open up and they connect. And so then I would be a little more open, and then other people would open up and connect. And it's very, very common among entrepreneurs. And you know, the study that I cited says that 70% of the general population, in my anecdotal experience, because I couldn't find a study specifically for entrepreneurs, but I think among entrepreneurs, it's more like 95, 98%. It is a lot of them. But we just don't talk about it very much. And actually in the book, I talk about the reasons why. There's a handful of key reasons why entrepreneurs are susceptible and are afraid to talk about it. And so I wanted to just pull that out and free people like you to just be open and honest about this. Cheryl asks the question, are there working environments that are too unhealthy to overcome the imposter syndrome? That's a really interesting question. There are definitely healthy and unhealthy environments, and there are environments that are going to prey on your insecurities because they're combative. And you know, I differentiate between competitive and combative. Competitive is healthy, like we're working hard and trying to one up one another in a gamesmanship sort of way, but we can be good sports about it. Versus combative is, in order for me to win, you have to lose. And so we've got to fight, and we're not on the same team. We're against one another because it's every person for themselves. And so those kind of environments are definitely going to feed your imposter syndrome because it's not safe to be honest. Anytime you're in an environment when it's not safe to be honest and vulnerable about an insecurity or a fear, you're going to withhold that. And that's just ammunition for the inner critic to play with, to work on, to hammer you with. And the interesting thing is that vulnerability, I'm going to give you one of the secrets of the book right now, like one of the critical key things. Vulnerability is what imposter syndrome will cause you to fear, but vulnerability is the antidote to imposter syndrome. When you open up and say, here's my strengths and my weaknesses, here's my courage and my fear, here's the things I know and the things I don't know. When you lay all that on the table when you're vulnerable, that inner critic no longer has anything. You take away all the weapons. You take away all the ammunition. Because when you lay that out and people still respect you, you know that respect is genuine. And you know that your success is not because you've pulled the wool over someone's eyes. So suddenly the imposter has nothing to work with. So vulnerability is the antidote to imposter syndrome. And because of that, when you're in an environment where vulnerability is not allowed or it's punished, then it's definitely going to feed imposter syndrome, and people are going to struggle to overcome that because they aren't allowed to overcome it. One more here. Johnny says, how do you get help for it without feeding it along the way? Imposter seems to seek cyclical validation without always growing along the way. So similar to what I was just talking about of how vulnerability is one of the keys. And so if you can't ask for help, and the imposter will tell you that you can't ask for help, it'll make you afraid to ask for help. If you can't ask for help, you're going to struggle to get over it, to get help, the help that you need. There's a story that I tell in the book of a young entrepreneur that I met, and he was telling me a great story. He had come out of college. He had landed some money from a big name investor and was growing this little company. But I could tell there was stress. I could tell that he was giving me the sales pitch and not the real story. And so I opened up to him. I told him about my own entrepreneurial journey, and I told him about my fears and worries and the stresses and all these things. And he literally began to tear up. And he said, this is the first real conversation I've had with anyone about how hard this is. And it was a powerful moment that I've never forgotten. And that's what happens when you can't reach for help. The imposter will tell you you can't be honest and tell someone you're struggling. But that help is what you need. And so the only way out of that cycle is you decide that you've got to break it and you've got to find someone to talk, or someone like I was able to do for this young man, someone comes along and offers you a lifeline and says, it's safe with me. You can talk to me. And let me tell you, when I did that for that young man, I gave him hope. I extended him a lifeline because I let him know that he didn't have to measure up to all the perfect entrepreneurs that he was seeing around him. That he could look to someone like me who had struggled and who had had fears and who had had worries and who had laid awake at night and wondered, how am I going to figure this out? And still got through it and still got to a place that he wants to be. So we need people in our life that we can be honest with. And we need to be honest with people who need us. So my hope for you is that as you read this book, it's not only going to help you with imposter syndrome and help you to change your mindset and your thinking about how you deal with that inner critic. My hope for you is that after reading this book, you will recognize the imposter at work in other people. And then you'll open up to them and give them a lifeline, that you'll tell them some stories that suddenly give them this release of all that tension and helps them to open up as well. When you do that for somebody, it's so amazing. It's so amazing.